Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we got to test out on the alpha, the Tower of Torghast, a tower that constantly changes with different enemies, a tower that will give your class various funny and random abilities to utilize and scale out your enemy. It's a World of Warcraft take on the roguelike experience, and I had my good first 2 hours in the tower on my Demon Hunter. Right now the tower is limited to only Demon Hunters, Mages, Priests, and Warlock, but they'll be adding more classes with their own abilities. Essentially what I want to do is go over the footage that I have because I didn't really record this with the audio, and just tell you about my very first experience within Tower of Torghast, what I saw, and show you guys the majority of the highlights. So this is going to be the very first video on the Torghast on the Demon Hunter, so I hope you guys enjoy. Remember that this is an alpha, so nothing is going to stay. Things are going to change by the time this is released, but it looks like at the very start, you can select a difficulty or a quest mode. Probably will have a scenario that will be needed for a Covenant quest line. At the beginning, you already get yourself the first Anima orb that will impact your gameplay. Right here, I have Rage Hoof and Force Swing as 2 options, so I can choose one or the other. And you collect these buffs throughout the Torghast experience, and these buffs can stack, so you can have some really interesting synergies and very interesting effects down the line. I wonder what kind of different builds you may be able to put together, just what kind of overpowered setups our class is going to have. And it seems that Blizzard releases content with mostly abilities that impact your class. There are some generalized abilities in there, but so many of the abilities that I've gotten from Tower Torghast were spec specific. So very interesting what kind of abilities and combos people will be able to put together. Off the bat, I decided to test the waters, trying to see how hard these enemies hit. They hit very hard. I continue my journey and pulling mobs very carefully until I encounter my first elite mob. Elite mobs have a stacking buff that will increase their damage output over time. So as they're hitting you with basic abilities, they'll just start hitting you harder and harder and harder. Also, every single one of the elite mobs will have a separate mechanic. As you can see with this mob, you have some blue mist shooting out of him, placing something on the ground that grows into a puddle that's just something you don't want to stand on. There are many mobs like it that have some sort of an extra effect that needs to be accounted for, but most of the mini bosses have a few mechanics, so it's nothing crazy. However, what gets crazy is when you put a bunch of them together in a single pull. But defeating these elite enemies will award you Anima orbs, which continues to implore you to want to kill all these elites to grow your character so you can have an easier time in future levels and future floors. Sometimes you'll be able to go for a cool combo, like I could actually go and double up on an ability I already had, or pick up something new, which is very similar to roguelike games, and in classic alpha fashion, we got DC'd. Time for a brand new run. At the beginning of the run, I have Force Swing, which will give Fel Rush extra range, or Soul Eater's Claw, which will give me extra souls. I decided to opt in for a defensive choice because, well, what am I going to do with Fel Rushes? But it's cool that they give you an idea of, hey, how do you want to build your character? Do you want to be heavy on mobility? Do you want to have some sort of buffs or extra utility? Sometimes these things are going to be flat damage, and oh my god, that's a lot of axes. So it looks like not only will you be fighting enemies, but you'll have spiked floors, axes swinging from the ceiling, and of course, literally fire everywhere. And other variety of endless traps. So not only are you in this tower to go with some of the most powerful enemies, but also everything is booby-trapped at the same time. And the variety of different content and different, can you even call traps enemies, that you can engage is actually kind of fresh. For my next buff, I went with Bottled Enigma, which essentially gives you a smoke bomb around your character, not letting ranged characters shoot at you from a distance, which is perfect for me to get into melee. Also around Torghast, I found a chest, which will have legendary components, which I guess we'll be using to craft legendary. So Tower of Torghast is going to be necessary for our new Legos in Shadowlands, Legos that are different than that what Legion had, as you get to craft those Legos with specific design and specific uses, which I think is a much better choice than completely randomized drops and randomized effects. The next buff I got is essentially Cheat Death instead of Phantasma. Phantasma will be the currency that you'll be collecting as you get through the Tower of Torghast. And at first I did not know what you can do with it, but apparently there is a vendor somewhere in the tower that you'll meet every few levels. And you'll be able to spend this Phantasma to buy specific upgrades for your character or either items to deal with the tower. In the tower you'll find certain elites with an aura. For example, this guy, the Tower Sentinel, decreasing my movement speed and haste, making my playstyle very sluggish, and he'll be doing this as long as I'm on this level. And there's a door guarding between me and him. I can see he's over there, but I need to first find a lever, and you never know which lever opens which door. So it gives you a bit more reason to go in exploring. Throughout the Torghast experience, you'll also be able to encounter allies, and for example, there's a Maldraxxus Necrolord in there, and he's looking for a friend called Buttons. If you find any allies in the tower and assist them, then they'll reward you with a special Anima power. They'll either give you incredible rewards, or at least that's what I would expect, because they don't really function right now on the alpha, or they give you extra passive buffs that can be huge in gameplay. You also have these elites that will have a few mechanics to fight through. They're mostly just soaking up a lot of damage from you. They do quite a bit of damage with a few key abilities, but most of them seem to be hard CCable, or at least for now. At least the Seeker of Souls is, and defeating these enemies will also award you an Anima Orb, further augmenting your abilities. I decided to continue on with more health bars with Icy Hard Crust to give me extra absorb when I'm below 15% health. So far, as a Demon Hunter, I'm feeling pretty squishy, and I don't think more damage is going to help. So essentially in the Shadowlands alpha for Tower of Torghast right now, it implores a lot of exploration. It implores achieving different tasks and trying to build your character. So it's going to be a pretty new and actually kind of an interesting experience because the levels vary, the variety of enemies and encounters will also vary, and you could do this as a solo player or with others. So imagine just how much fun and synergy could you have with other players, be they tanks, healers, or DPS. And while that's all nice and dandy, what I actually had the most fun with is the Anima abilities and just how crazy scaled you can make your character. I mean, starting with this item, Crumbling Aegis. Gain immunity to damage and harmful effects for 1.5 minutes after choosing this item, which will force you to do as much damage as possible in a limited amount of time. So this is where you would want to go grouping up enemies, and even though I could go with the ability that gave you a free talent, I decided to try out the big AoE. I also decided to pick up the Mask of the Winged Dominator, further increasing the carrying ability, which provides quite a bit of AoE damage. And from here on, I decided to mostly go with damaging abilities, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made. You also have these urns that you can destroy, and in Torghast you have a variety of these objects that can be destroyed, and sometimes they'll drop you Anima Orbs. And I thought this was interesting. Phantasmal Iris. Looting Phantasma increases the damage of your next item by 1%. While another free talent sounds amazing, what if I told you that just looting enemies out in the open world while questing increased an ability's damage by an X amount? That's essentially what this is. It was only a few traps away that I was able to finally complete my objective and reunite the Maldraxxus boy with Buttons, which is like his little abomination pet. The Maldraxxus guy ended up offering me an Anima Orb to further augment my abilities, which have interesting uses. On one hand, I could get a satchel filled with bones and meats, whatever that does, or I could go with a Maldraxxine Repayment, which, like very similar to the corruptions, have a chance to activate a lot of versatility for 15 seconds. And this is where the damage scaling truly began. At a time later, I also picked up Dark Glare Medallion over the Mask of Winged Dominator for I-Beam to have a 20% chance to not incur a cooldown. Imagine just getting lucky and spamming I-Beam back to back. Continuing on through the tower, I'm pulling far more packs of enemies with so much healing, and I pick up Crown of Abstinence to make it harder for casters to cast around me. Pulling even more trash packs through all this survivability, I find myself the Shackle Broker, which is the vendor, who has a variety of loot. Around him I also pick up the Ethereum Sensor, so all healing that isn't holy increased even further, so I can pull even bigger trash packs and do far more damage and pick up even more buffs as I go along the way. I got a couple freebie Anima powers that don't really do much, but then I got a big one here with Searing Deathbrand, allowing my Illicit Decree to do 40% more damage. Also, let's go for even more tankiness with Oblaron Endurance for 60% more maximum health. Tormentor's Spike News making Imprison into a mind control on enemies, Venter's Gratitude to increase my crit chance from abilities, and now I'm able to pull even more enemies, making them fight amongst one another. Picking up extra single target damage with Felborn Torch, making Carrier Strikes do 50% more damage while Immolation Aura is up. And this is where I realized just how easy the enemies have become. I mean, sometimes I have to cheese myself a little bit. I have to run away from enemies, hide behind line of sight, make sure everything is grouped together. But the amount of survivability I have gained in a very short amount of time, I mean, it's incredible. You usually never get to feel this strong as a Demon Hunter starting out at the very beginning of this tower experience. Just 2 enemies are able to obliterate you, but if you scale your character to get lucky enough, you might have a build where even what's supposed to be a boss with some endgame loot actually stands no chance. Although this guy is my favorite because as a slime boss, he actually splits into droplets, which is kind of dope. Right now the boss doesn't really drop anything, but I wonder, like Visions, could these bosses drop gear as well? But it does seem like defeating bosses does give you a lot better anima abilities to get, like just having enemies randomly generate soul fragments around you every 5 seconds. I mean, if I already wasn't immortal as a demon hunter, I had to go with Soul Render of Zaval. I press on, taking on more enemies, making them that much easier after picking on Oblaron Spikes for extra haste, Will Breaker to increase my single target damage, 3 Demon's Bites, and the enemy is marked for death, taking 10% more damage. I also picked up the Mark of the Ogre, which is supposed to do stuff, but I mostly did it just so I can be huge. Afterwards, we continue on, picking up Tremor Beast Tusk, which gives you basically thorns and a knockback if enemies hit you hard enough, with Mana Feeder's Bib, so every time I consume magic off of enemies, I get even more healing, and I'm pulling enemies that are actually quite rough at level 20. I'm pulling a bunch of enemies that should be able to 1v1 me, enemies that have variety of buffs and even crowd control in order to stop me, but it seems that at this point, I'm just unstoppable. My run was going good until I literally got scammed by a carrion that gave me sword off my back, but when you take a look at the sword, it's not a sword. However, the idea of being able to get a powerful weapon from the tower and take it into dungeons or raids, I wonder how strong those weapons will be. Could that be equivalent to endgame raiding weapons? And I wonder just how much gear can you get from the tower? I guess only time will tell, as it is way too early in the alpha. But after this mishap, we press on, picking up a couple more buffs to increase the base damage of our abilities, couple stats, and then we go for big enemy pulls, pulling everything around the corner, stacking it up, and then nuking it down as fast as humanly possible. And I continue doing this, trying to see if I might be able to reach the very end of the Tower of Torghast. And then we find the creme de la creme, Cadaverous Eye. I-beam cooldown is reduced by 85% during Metamorphosis. So if you want to know just how good this build is now, I essentially pop Metamorphosis on top of all the enemies I've grouped up. Maybe I'll throw in the Kirin ability just for extra AoE, and then I just press I-beam. A lot of these enemies in the later rows will try to disarm you, but with I-beam being the only damaging ability that I need, at this point I feel literally unstoppable. While I'm blasting away, I-beaming the world while inside of the tower, I actually level up, because to enter into the Tower of Torghast, you're still going to be playing as your level 50, 51 or 52, maybe 53 level character out in the real world. However, you are upscaled in order to try out this experience. Blizzard gives you a set item level, and I wonder if maybe, potentially, it's possible to do Tower of Torghast as an alternative for leveling in the future. Which, with how much fun I'm having with this piece of content, I mean, I actually would enjoy. The carnage continues, obliterating through every enemy, and I'm so glad I didn't even have recount running, because this damage is disgusting. One puzzle later, and we continue on into the tower. Then it all comes down to this, you versus the final boss of Tower of Torghast. And if I'm honest, he was actually really easy. I mean, the character that I had 64 various anima powers scaling him up, amazing survivability, incredible damage, I-beam that had the shortest cooldown possible. I didn't even have metamorphosis when fighting this guy, and To be honest, the boss was actually kind of easy. I don't know if he's properly scaled or not, or maybe those 64 Anima powers are keeping me in the godhood state, actually unable to be obliterated by any ability. I even decided just to stand in his main Crown Crush just to see what happens. And I mean, I don't take a lot of damage. He even reflects damage to himself. It's just that much damage that's going out, and I don't even have to do anything half the time. I do hope they scale up the boss, because that was it. This final door that you exit, that is the end to the Tower of Torghast. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is the alpha. This is just maybe non-complete tower, and I'm pretty sure it's supposed to have an infinite amount of, I guess, levels to climb. Eventually, you'll hit that cap where you just cannot defeat the enemies, as they are scaled way too high with all that extra damage. But this was fun. This was a really different experience with a roguelike that I felt was actually, well, I don't play a lot of roguelikes, so I don't know how I can judge this as a roguelike experience, but for someone who likes World of Warcraft, likes playing a ton of WoW, this was a very fun activity to do in World of Warcraft. I actually had a lot of fun. I don't know if Demon Hunter was overpowered, or maybe I just got it real lucky with the very tanky build that I had, but eventually a character can ascend godhood. I can definitely see doing this a billion times with a bunch of friends or guildies, and just trying the tower, try to see just how high I can go, the different class combinations you might have, or even trying this out as a solo challenge. But this seems like a really promising piece of content. If this was something to be alongside of, for the rest of World of Warcraft, with raids, dungeons, or doing the Tower of Torghast, or Tower, I guess they can really make it Tower of anything if they want to make it seasonal, I guess. Tower climbs could be something that could be fun in World of Warcraft. But this is my full run of the Tower of Torghast. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. I think if I do this in the future, I will record my audio with this so you can see my reaction as I advance the tower, but I wasn't planning on recording audio. I just kind of wanted to check out this content, maybe have some 5 minutes of recording for it, and it turned into about 2 hours worth of enjoyable experience, and I just want to show you guys some of the highlights. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Let me know what you think about Torghast, and let me know what you think about my run. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.